So then we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end, period Mashiyach the prophet. We find then the great prophet in the 61st chapter explaining many areas of the time of the restoration. And also Daniel did explain via the angel what would come as a result of the time of the restoration. So then Daniel the prophet, he explains as himself as a prophet when tabernacling then came down and then destroyed the statue. But then prior of this time, we understand obviously most of his lifetime he spent with a Gentile level. So let's understand then what Daniel the politician and tradesperson has stated very clearly, so we can understand the time of the end properly. The 11th chapter of Daniel gives you then the geographical area related with the time of restoration. Try to understand, prior of the 11th chapter you have then the bulk of understanding in the 2nd chapter, where then Daniel saw the statue then saw by the king of Babylon. And the king of Babylon was then the head of gold. He was a very tough individual. He was a king, and he absolutely had no patience with lying tongue. If he was catching a person lying in his presence, a person would die instantly. So then we understand as then the king of Babylon, that's why then the head of gold. So gold, when symbolized a kingdom, has to do with a person does not admit lies. This is what it means, gold, in the holy language. You have to understand what it means. For some people, gold means a piece of metal where you can exchange. If those nations scandalize, they can lie and get by with it. This is the time that they should not. So let's understand what it means then, gold, from the viewpoint of tabernacling. There he is then, Daniel saw the big statue, and then Daniel explained every area of the statue. Then the head of gold, and then you find then the silver, then the bronze, and then iron with the clay, the base of the statue. So then Daniel explained the relationship of the first, second, and third, and the fourth areas of the statue as kingdoms. Then obviously the end, we find then iron does not mix with the clay. But then obviously, since we understand the Creator giving him the basics of each of those metals are representing then a kingdom, we have to understand the movement and the motions of those kingdoms, some of them iron, some of them clay, how they're going to treat each other. Since we understand the time of restoration of the holy cities of the Mashiyach, laid waste for many centuries, stated in Mashiyach the 61st chapter, we find then obviously areas of the 11th chapter where we can identify then those kingdoms related with the forward motion of the trade of the Gentile level. We are not talking regarding then tabernacling. Tabernacling is not part of it. So then, at the moment, since we are from the Gentile level, because the world then has experienced more than 1,000 years of deceit, scoundrelizations, lies, cheatings, scoundrels, politicians, they murder, they steal, and they never get punished. Oh, the time has come. Obviously, there is steps of formation regarding then the area of the Gentiles, and then the treatment of these kingdoms. We find then the kingdom of the East, China, the kingdom of the North, Soviet Union, and the kingdom of the South, Africa. These are obviously the main talkers of the base of the statue. Besides tabernacling, those are it. Then we have shortly later leave some space for then the Ishmaelites. Very important understanding then the Ishmaelites and their role as then the nation, then providing the world with energy or crude so then the world can trade. How this understanding then comes to the surface? We have the understanding obviously from the time of Joseph. Joseph was then the son, and he was then sold into slavery, and he went to Egypt. When he was sold to slavery, then his brothers, they were so envious of him, and then he was sold away. There was a caravan of the Ishmaelites. That's where we find then the Ishmaelites in charge of the trade. So have this word, Ishmaelites, trade. However, they are not going to be involved directly with the most bulk of the trade of the planet as far as production is concerned. They are related with crude, energy. Then power those ships, power those aircrafts, trains, and trucks to make sure there is a movement of trade. Based on what they have learned from Ibrahim, the friend of the Creator, then there is a specific moral code. We understand this code then obviously used as then sections and categorizations of what country then is going to receive, what country not going to receive crude. Obviously there are other countries on the planet that can produce lots of crude. Understandable. The situation is this. Since the Mashiyach gave the answer already of the future, he said very precisely, and the freighters of the earth. The Mashiyach did not mention kingdoms, he said freighters. The Mashiyach is explaining because the time of restoration comes where we understand the Creator himself being industrious. We understand the Mashiyach already in line with the language of being industrious. He's not speaking anymore of kingdoms. Kingdoms were during the time of the Mashiyach where he was then in charge, but then there was a scoundrelization going on along with, but not in tabernacling. Let's try to understand with, because then we have to understand the layer from Daniel where then the holy instructions or the holy people would be mixed up or scoundrelized with the rest of the world. Great news. They are mixing themselves, because the Creator does not mix himself with what is not his. Whatsoever is not his must be clearly labeled. So then we find the movements of this trade from the world, the kingdom of the north, doing the most of the work as far as the selection of the best deals from the nations they are involved with Christianity. Christianity is from a lineage scoundrelized with the holy instructions. They do not fit the category of instructions, and they do not fit any other category. So those are going to be then filtered through the Soviet Union. China won't have any more time to waste with other countries. They're going to be extremely busy. There are countries coming out of poverty. There are many areas of the world coming out of harsh times, and then the number of packages, the number of ships, the number of aircraft, the number of trains and trucks, they are going to be very numerous. We won't have any more time and luxury of having countries with not very big outcome of economy than wasting precious time of the Chinese. There are areas of formation where then any other nation going through then obviously the Soviet Union, and then filtering through the whole situation, making sure the idea then is profitable, the idea then has a backing up of materials, transportation, and then until the final product then is boxed, make sure there is market for it. China is going to be busy doing these new ideas as per their standards. the nations, they won't have any more the luxury of going over there and wasting time, because the demand, the situation is with the demand. The demand is extremely high. Then we understand what the Mashiyach said, and the freighters of the earth. When the system becomes available in the short next 36 months, the demand for products is going to be extreme. If you think China is a great country, and they are a great country, however, imagine double or more of what they are this time, this existing time, then producing. It's going to be extreme. They won't have any more time of having these niceties. People, politicians, some of them, they barely how to put up a fence in their backyard. They don't even know how to do it. But they are treated as celebrity of some sort of a cinema or some sort of a star that does not fit with the makeup of China as the factory of the world. If you are a person that does not have industry background, you never worked with manufacturing before, what are you going to be doing in China for? So not only a person that does no manufacturing is not going to be in China anymore, but then there is the Kingdom of the North, very experienced with the dealings and scandalizations of Christianity, that knows how to filter through what is true and what is not true. They are experts in finding out those who are scoundrels and if the deal is going to stick or not stick. Only those that are serious regarding what to produce, then what having as a new idea as production, then goes through. Then obviously there is a relationship then from the Soviet Union and China, where then the actual products are then produced, already backed up by transport and then raw materials. Either raw materials is straight from any country or mostly from Africa, straight to China, or goes to someplace else to get smeltered, and then China receives the final raw material, but yet properly refined. And the rest of the countries, they have to go through their own stupidity, find out what leaders are worthy for the positions, make sure the politicians, they understand economy, understanding then expenses, understanding then the flow of cash versus what they can produce, and understanding industry. If a country is not producing, they are going to be left as an uncapped field. If you don't maintain the field, it turns to wild. So then, welcome to the great time of restoration, where then we understand the Creator truly is very industrious, is He not? So then, with this understanding in mind, let's make sure then the politicians, they are already preparing themselves, because they won't have these niceties anymore. These nice people over there with their own aircrafts paid by the government, they have lunch paid by the government and being picked up by the government. They have to line up themselves with the freighters. And the freighters, they are very objective. They are not playing around with this BS of politicians. There is no time for it. That's why the Mashiyach said then, and the freighters of the earth. So then we understand what's coming. As far as relationship with other countries, we have to deal with the Soviet Union. So then we understand why the Soviets are in charge of the BRIC. If you don't understand what BRIC means, is Brazil, Soviet Union itself, and then China, and then India and South Africa. Isn't that interesting? They are in charge. And then China is going to be exclusively working with their own means. Their dynasty is from many thousand years ago. They don't have to have anybody's religion. If they have the raw materials, they know how to produce, and they should not be bothered. So then, not only they have production, but they have to maintain then the system, because their system is going to be throughout the world. So then, nations and countries should line up themselves, obviously with the freighters, because the Mashiyach already gave the answer, and then lining up their tax deductions via the freighters' labeling. Quite direct explanation. If those, they don't get done, politicians, they are out of job. Because this time they're going to understand who the Creator is. During the time of the 1,000 years, scandalizations were the normal. But those are abnormal. So let's verify we understand what is normal first, prior of the events, because they're going to be very intensive. Very, very intense. They won't have any more time to spare. No more conversations lasting for days. You know, trying to be very sensitive because you know what you say may reflect, either you understand manufacturing, either you understand what you want, what product do you want in mind, what do you have in your project, do you want it produced or you do not want to produce. If you do not want to produce, don't show up your face. Very simple. Then we find not only this, but in the Soviet Union, replete with people from around the world, conversing with them, finding out what can be done. Because they have the best equipment and they understand where to get raw materials from. Very straightforward. However, if you are a politician without manufacturing background, you are out of job. Very simple. There is no more time for junky politicians with nails painted and then nice car and then a piece of paper hanging stating senator. Does not even know how to put up a fence in the backyard. There is no job for you. You can be sure of it, the freighters won't let you be in your job. Your job is to provide services and make sure you understand what the freighters want and then furthering their work in order to make it simple in facilitating of what they want. Very simple and straightforward. So let's enjoy and make the best of it during this time of restoration.